Truth Frequency Radio Network. K-TFRN. Worldwide.
Hola, this is Sienna Lea, inviting you to join me tonight as we navigate through the seen and the unseen, explore external and internal realities, expose on-world and off-world agendas, discover a path to joy and freedom. Now, join me as we illuminate the Shadowland and reclaim our birthright as free and sovereign beings. Okay, good night. Good night, good day, and good morning, everyone. This is Sienna Lea, and this is Illuminating the Shadowland. We're with episode 8, Sneaking Through the Backdoor of Your Mind with Tom Montalk. We are in episode 3 of a 3-hour trilogy with Tom, and where we have been wising up to the alien agenda. We're told by many New Age teachings that we're creating our own reality. But until we're fully aware of the hidden influences, many of us are puppets for other dimensional forces that seek to manipulate us with their own agendas. Here in part 3 of Wising Up to the Alien Influence, we are going to go deeper tonight into the covert machinations that currently maneuver through billions of unsuspecting souls. There are 2 types of alien and demonic phenomena, overt and hidden. The overt phenomena are easy to notice. They may include intimidation, harassment, paranormal phenomena, and remembered abduction experiences. These comprise the bulk of experiences that you find in movies and books and television because they're so tangible and in your face. But they are just the tip of the iceberg, according to Tom Montalk, my guest tonight. Often they are just bluffs or misdirections meant to distract you. Most of what negative aliens and demons actually engage in can be described as hidden interference, which is far more serious and effective because it tries to sneak through the back door of your mind and exploit your weaknesses and blind spots without you noticing what's going on. Welcome to tonight's show, Tom.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Wow, I seem to be tongue-tied at the moment. I would like to jump right in this hour to some of your overt experiences, and I feel very honored and privileged that you're willing to share them with us. I know you don't speak a lot about your personal alien experiences, but I just think it is incredibly valuable for people to understand, besides the vast website you have at montalk.net and the decades of research that you've done, that you've actually lived through these things yourself.
Yes, I would like to start off with some of my more overt experiences and then in a short bit get into the more covert stuff, because I think that's the stuff that will be more applicable to a wider number of people. But my earliest overt experience actually happened in 1981 in Germany, and that's when I was less than a year old. I remember I was in my crib in my room at night with all the lights turned off except for this night light that was shining up at a spinning mobile suspended above me. So I was lying down looking up at it when suddenly this pale face with black eyes peers over the crib and looks down at me. I remember being terrified and screaming the word Geist at the top of my lungs. Geist is a German word for ghost, and I grew up in Germany as a full-blooded German. And that was actually my first word in life, ghost. Go figure.
Well,
so my parents would run into the room to check on me, but whatever it was gone. And I asked my mom about this, and she said that this happened quite a bit. When I was between 8 months and about a year and a half old. So that was the first one that I had.
Okay, there are a number of other ones. I don't know if you want to go into these. The Stone Men or the Great.
Oh yeah, right, yeah, that one. So then between 1982 and 1985, between ages 2 and 5, I had several dozen more abductions from that same apartment in Germany. The couple that I remember, they all started out the same way. Like I'd be in my parents' bedroom during the early afternoon. I'd just awoken from a nap. And oftentimes my mom would be there standing next to me in the bed. So she tells me to stay there while she attends to some business out in the hallway. And the bedroom door was closed, but I could tell that there was like a lot of activity happening on the other side of that door. So she walks out the door and closes it behind her, and at that point, that's when I would suddenly remember all the previous times that this happened. It's like a memory started coming back, and I thought to myself, oh no, not this again. So I panicked, and I looked for a place to hide, which is usually either under the bed or in the back corner of the room between some furniture. But as I was running for cover, the door would open, and in would pour like a half dozen or more what looked like grays, like gray aliens in cobalt blue suits. And, they swooped right in on me, and that's when I would black out. And after that, I would only have a couple more memory fragments, but nothing more beyond that. One thing I do recall is landing on a grassy field near some mountains with the sun starting to set. But when the abduction was over, I'd wake up back in the bedroom, and it would be early afternoon again. So I suspect that I was taken east, maybe western Russia or somewhere, to a different time zone. Actually, out there's the Ural Mountains, which are known to be a pretty big UFO hotspot. Now, during those years, I also had a terrible fear of owls, and I was always talking to my parents and grandparents about what I called the Steindimension, which is German for stone men. And I called them that because their vibes were like, they were like non-living things that were somehow animated. So, so it's kind of creepy. So I was definitely being abducted back then, but what they did to me exactly, I don't remember. And that was the end of what I remember from my time in Germany.
Wow, that's incredible. And now you say that you haven't been like overtly harassed or intimidated. Well, I am having a heck of a time even forming words tonight, but we're pushing through the energy to get this through, so that's okay. The obvious black vans parked outside and the threatening phone calls, it's never been like your mode. It's been these early abductions, and then it's gone into other realms for you, the more serious hidden forms of interference. Are we ready to dive into that now?
Well, let me share just one more before we get into that.
Yeah.
And that's the one I've told it before, but it's worth repeating for people who haven't heard it. This one here, let's fast forward now to October of 2002, and I'm living in Florida at the time in my own studio apartment. I was up late one night working on this article for my site when I heard something dash across the front lawn of the private courtyard outside, and it made a rustling sound, kind of like porcupine quills or like dry leaves being shaken. And from the sound of it, I could tell that it was bipedal. It had two legs, and it was about as light as a child. It didn't make the huge, heavy thumping sounds that an adult might make. But it moved way too quickly for a person, and that's what made me concerned. So I projected my mental feelers out into the darkness. And when I connected with whatever it was, I got goosebumps all over me because that thing just felt wrong. And that's when I heard this thing step onto the concrete porch outside and slowly, pitter-patter up to my door. So I stared at the door as it got closer, and then boom, it threw itself up against the door and started rattling like it was trying to get in. And, because I was sitting on the floor, I couldn't see through the gaps between the glass slats on the door. I mean, this was a door that had these angled glass slats that you could open or close. So I could only see through the glass slats themselves. And what I remember seeing was a pinkish blob shaped like a face, around doorknob height, and a smaller blob shaped like a hand with long fingers about halfway down. And this thing was probably therefore about 3 to 4 feet tall. And, I didn't know what it was exactly, but I had a feeling it was non-human, definitely. So after yelling at it to identify itself a couple times, it didn't say anything. And then finally I commanded it in the name of God to go away, figuring it was some supernatural thing. But it just stayed there and pressed up against the door, rattling it. And that's when I reached for the phone and began dialing my girlfriend's number. And when she finally answered, and I looked back up at the door, the thing was finally gone. So I told her about that, and I told her I was coming over right away. I didn't want to be there anymore. And then I only had to... Yeah.
Oh.
And then I had to make a run for my car through that same dark courtyard, which was kind of scary, but luckily I didn't encounter that being again. And so that was that. And then in the fall of 2004, we had finally moved to Virginia after the hurricanes drove us out of Florida. And just a month or two later, I heard that same exact rustling sound outside the window from the cement patio out there. My girlfriend at the time, she heard it too, and she knew immediately what it might be. And our cat, our kitty, she also heard it, and she actually went nuts running from window to window trying to look out into the darkness of whatever made that noise. And she never did that with deer or raccoons or anything, so this was quite different. So instinctively, I just went around and closed all the blinds, made sure that nothing could see in, and I couldn't see out. And that was the end of the incident. I mean, I'm sure if I had seen a face peering through the window, I think I would have totally lost it.
Whoa. So these things, rather than freak you out entirely, they became a life challenge to understand and to research and to understand the depths of what this all could be, I take it from.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, even back in Germany when I had my alien experiences, also a couple of ghost experiences, it taught me from an early age that reality was really, really weird. So, I never took it for granted that reality was normal like all the skeptics say. I mean, I already knew from the start that there are really huge mysteries, and me being me, I don't like being unsatisfied with mystery, so, I always try to figure them out. So that's what I've been doing for the past 30 some years.
Well, most of the stuff that you have reported, normal psychiatrists and psychologists would say that you were, mentally imbalanced, and they would probably give you drugs, and they would probably treat you as somebody who was very ill. And what do you say to that?
Well, the one thing I noticed about a lot of academics and intellectuals like that is that they tend to think in black and white terms, like 0 or 1, light switch on or off. I mean, it's kind of like a one-bit computer, it's either 0 or 1. And 1 to them is everything that they believe in, the mainstream consensus. And 0 then is everything else. It doesn't matter if it's actually true or not, as long as it's different from their own viewpoint, and as long as it doesn't agree with their peer review process and everything, then of course they have to dismiss it as being subjective. But what it comes down to is that they are incapable of distinguishing between a genuinely hallucinated event that someone might have and an actual objective phenomenon that is outside of their level of understanding. So because they can't tell the difference between the two, they always have to lump it into one category. So, as long as they can't tell the difference, I don't think they're qualified to make that determination.
Very true.
Right.
True. Well, we're going to keep going into this, knowing that it's very real and that there are many, many people having these sorts of experiences. Of course, we do know that a lot of these overt experiences are sensationalized, and we're hearing all kinds of things about alien abduction. It's all coming out. But there's a whole other layer of this, and this is what we're mainly going to dive in tonight, because it is more serious, and it is hidden forms of interference. And from what I understand, most of us are actually undergoing it, and most of us don't have a clue that any of it is even happening. So let's take it one step at a time. Customized disinformation agents. What is this about?
Well, I noticed a recurring pattern with aware people, which was that what seems like a disinformation agent would enter their life shortly after the beginning of their awakening process. It was like something was trying to nip these people in the bud before they could build up discernment. I had mine in 2001 after I first stumbled across the idea that reality itself might be a kind of conspiracy, that it might be like a counterfeit reality like in the Matrix movies or the Truman Show. Well, a couple weeks into this, a woman emails me through another website that I owned that was completely separate from my main site. I mean, no one who visited that site could possibly know that I was the one behind it. And I hadn't even yet published anything concerning the Matrix idea. And yet there she was telling me about reality being fake and listing off some of the very same websites I had been looking into regarding that theory. So her contacting me was quite weird and synchronistic, to say the least. Well, she mirrored all my thoughts and theories about it, as if trying to gain rapport with me, except that she would add this disinformative paranoid spin to it all. So as the weeks went on, the spin would just keep on increasing and basically try to pull me along with it. So she tried to mirror me, but then add all this poison on top of the sugar, I guess you could say. to get me to swallow the whole thing. Well, I got the impression she was hurried, like some salesperson trying to close a deal, and that's kind of what tipped me off. Well, I wasn't really buying into it fast enough for her, and that's when she did a total 180 and tried to bite my head off. And here I mean like a total emotional breakdown. And and to play on my sympathies to start agreeing with her. Well, when that didn't work, that's when she became really nice again. And but then after that, then she did another 180 degrees again, and that's when I finally cut her out because she was a emotional nutcase. Well, I've known dozens of other people over the years who've had similar stories of someone entering their lives like synchronistically in a weird way, who worked pretty quickly to gain rapport, only to dump on them a bunch of disinformation and try to lead them around by the nose, and then do a 180 when it wasn't working. So, yeah, you have to watch out for these controlling disinformation types. They tend to hit people when they're just starting out and they're kind of optimistic and naive and willing to listen to someone who agrees with them. But a lot of times it's too good to be true. So you shouldn't let yourself be controlled by someone that deep down is off in some way.
Well, how do people discern that? That is so, I don't even know what the word is, because I think that's going on so very often right now, all over the place. How did you develop the discernment to sense that she was disingenuous?
Well, it's because what she was telling me. I mean, because at the time I was doing this research into the Matrix idea, and it wasn't just me reading and absorbing. I mean, I actually wrote it out in my notebook and cross-checked the facts and my observations. So after comparing that with her stuff, I could I started noticing that she was emphasizing all the parts of that theory that I had determined were unviable, most likely false and spiritually dangerous. So I wondered, like, how could she be so specific, focusing on only those things? That's what got me suspicious. And also at the time, I had some dreams that, in one dream, she was represented as a metallic-looking android beating a military tin drum while a military barracks was burning down. And I decoded that dream and basically determined that she was programmed in some way and was trying to get me to follow, to the beat of her drum, which was not a good thing because it would lead into a burning down, I guess, of my spiritual integrity, I guess you could say.
Well, I know that this can be overwhelming when people start listening and diving into this material, and I just want to say to our audience that I consider it very brave and courageous to open to this material, and we are going to be supporting people who are sensing these things are happening to them and want support for it and want more information. And we'll tell you about that a little bit later. And, of course, there's Tom's incredible website, montalk.net, and we'll also hook you up with how you can get in touch with him to dive deeper into this. So hang in there, you all, because we're just at the tip of the iceberg here. All right.
I should just mention something really quick before we can go on.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I wanted to mention that the earlier, overt kinds of experiences, like with the aliens and stuff like that I actually remember, it's pretty rare in my life. I mean, I don't even have a quarter of the experiences that others that I know might. Check out, for instance, my girlfriend's website at in2worlds.net. If you'd like some cool anecdotes, with paranormal and it's just lots of interesting life experiences. I'm normally the guy taking in everyone else's experiences and crunching the data. That's my preferred thing. But, I don't really get the open harassment like black vans parked outside or the threatening phone calls or, aliens telling me they're going to replace me with a clone if I don't stop what I'm doing, which has happened to some people. But that stuff doesn't really work on me because it only makes me fight harder with more confidence. I actually realize that they're angry and they've confirmed that they're angry, so therefore, it kind of validates me. The only thing that really stops me is this lack of self-confidence and doubt about what I'm doing. So as long as they kind of hang back and try to work behind the scenes to actually play on my lack of confidence, that's the main weapon that's been used against me. But, overt intimidation, no, it doesn't really work. And and that disinformation agent I just mentioned, near the beginning, I did buy into her story. It was only after a couple of weeks of noticing the weird spin to it all that I became suspicious. So.
Well, we can't be totally shut down by everything coming our way. You have to jump in and explore. And while that is such an incredibly important point that you just made, that all they can do is play on your own lack of self-confidence and self-worth, which we all have in spades because it's been programmed into us through our schools and through our traumas and through all of our education in this culture that we live in. It is the place where they can get to us. So thank you for sharing that. All right, shall we go on now to paranoia-induced synchronicities? Or
Yeah, definitely. That's a good topic. Yeah, so another thing that I started noticing back then, back when I was researching the whole Matrix idea, was how my beliefs could actually warp reality into creating synchronicities that reinforced those beliefs. Like for a short while there, I really was like starting to believe that reality was fake. I mean, I still believe that to some extent, but back then it was a little bit over the top. And also that people around me were only pretending to be human, which is well, I'll get into that. And wouldn't you know it, my college roommates and their friends then started mirroring my thoughts, saying things that pertained to what I had been thinking or noticing that day. Like, for example, I remember this. I mean, I had like a little notebook back then that I wrote down all these incidents, and I looked for it before the show, and I couldn't find it. So, but the one I do remember, I was walking home from class one day when I came across a shoe in the grass. It's like one of those black flats. Well, I thought that was a little weird, but I put it out of my mind. And then as soon as I got back to my apartment and sat down to rest, my roommate's girlfriend, she comes in and sits down and starts telling me about the black flats she just bought. And then she showed them to me, and they're the same exact kind that I saw earlier. So I thought that was really weird. Like, what are the chances of that, right? Well, stuff like that would happen several times a day for several weeks. And, it totally seemed like people knew what I was doing and thinking at all times. And if I hadn't snapped out of it, I definitely could have easily descended into all-out paranoid schizophrenia. But knowing what I know now, most of what was happening back then was actually being generated by my own subconscious, bending probability and nudging other people's thoughts. So it's not like they were consciously aware of what they were doing. Just an idea would pop into their head, and little did they know it was a projection. Well, most likely it was a projection of my own subconscious beliefs. So my subconscious was being filled with, really paranoid beliefs that were seemingly bleeding over into reality itself. I mean, that's the way I view it now. I mean, sure, there are hybrids, from what I've seen, and aliens pretending to be human who might have telepathic powers, but there's also a lot of self-generated synchronistic phenomena that can mimic that and add to it. So, that's why I recommend that people drop the deep-seated fear and paranoia of these things and try to seek awareness with a sense of confidence and positivity, because you don't want to make reality any weirder than it already is.
wow, that is really important. And so many people in the New Age talk about synchronicities like they're all divinely and perfectly inspired, and the perfect plan is unfolding through our synchronicities. So I'm really relieved to hear you talk about these dark side synchronicities, because they can be happening, and you think it's so hard for people when you're in that to get, wait a minute, I'm creating this, and you're also saying it's being manipulated, right? Both.
Yes, and there's different kinds of synchronicities. Like, it's one thing to, let's say, think of a blue butterfly, and then you're walking down the sidewalk, and there's one right there on the sidewalk. That's one thing. Versus, you see a butterfly and are thinking about it, and then someone tells you, oh, hey, I like blue butterflies. Well, what they're saying to you isn't necessarily a bending of probability. It could just be a simple telepathic phenomenon, or in some cases, if you're a person who has discarnate negative entities that kind of hover around you, they can speak to other people in your vicinity if those people are in a kind of spacing out or something. So that happens too. But some synchronicities are positive in my experience, and some are kind of deceptive, and some aren't really technically synchronicities at all in the sense of probability bending, but just telepathic or entity related.
This is why it's so important to become awake and to take the inner journey to be able to discern what is and is not the case, because there are synchronicities. There are beautiful connections with the mother planet that have incredible magic and synchronicities that are extraordinarily life-affirming, and these are real. I didn't mean to make less of that, but the whole key is discernment, and that takes a process of education, which brings us back to the fact that we are definitely heading more and more in the direction of those people who are ready to gain the benefit of somebody such as yourself who's taken this journey and can be an educator and a way shower, because it's a long ride to develop these kinds of discernment. So we are doing an overview here tonight, but we will have follow-up places for you to go to learn more and to understand it more deeply. So, yeah, we definitely are doing this in the spirit of positivity and self-empowerment, not to overwhelm people that these things can't be gotten through, because you seem to have gotten through many of them yourself, in that you're outlining them and can be so clear about them. And they don't seem to have so much power over you anymore. Is that true?
Yeah, that is true. Like I said, what I get now is about 10% of what I used to get, because 90% of it I was actually enhancing or self-generating through my own subconscious, being programmed with really false beliefs back then.
Wow. Okay. Well, actually, we're going to the break. Let's give them your website, Tom. It's montalk.net, correct?
Yeah, Montalk with an L, so montalk.net.
Yes, and we will be back with part 2 shortly. This is Sienna Lea, Illuminating the Shadowland, with tonight's guest, Tom Montalk. Stay with us. Welcome back, everyone. This is Sienna Lea. This is Illuminating the Shadowland, and I'm here with my guest this week, Tom Montalk. We're talking about wising up to alien interference. Tom, can we go into depression and aggression, how that is being a tool for manipulation now? Or will we finish with the synchronicity?
Yes. Okay. Yes. Depression and aggression. One of the most important things I've learned is that not all of our thoughts and emotions are necessarily our own. They can be induced from the outside by various technologies and psychic means. I mean, people can be neutralized this way if their minds are bent towards like self-destructive attitudes, like despair, apathy, depression, suicidal thoughts, and so on. And of course, people get these naturally from just life events and chemical imbalances. But there's times when I would get hit with a dark cloud of negative energies just prior to being faced with an important decision or situation in my life. So the strategic timing of these things, that suggested that there could have been some calculation behind it, and that's what then began cluing me into the idea that they could be externally induced in some way. For example, at the end of high school, when I was doing a lot of college and scholarship applications, weeks would go by and I'd feel totally fine, and at the same time I wasn't doing any scholarship applications or anything like that. And then one morning, I would wake up feeling utterly defeated and worthless, and depressed for really no reason that I could discern. And coincidentally, that very same day, a counselor would tell me to apply for a particular scholarship that had come up. And I had no way of knowing that morning that this day, I'd be given that opportunity. So if I had given into that artificial attitude that I woke up with, then I would have not even bothered applying. But most of the time, I actually ended up pushing myself, and I went for it anyways, just because that's how I was. And because of that, I ended up getting a full ride to my 4 years in college. So that was a good thing that came out of overcoming these weirdly timed hits, to my balance. Yeah, but had I given into those feelings, then my life would be very different now. Same with, I wouldn't have discovered a lot of the things that I have, because the college ended up giving me the physics and math background to discover a lot of the physics ideas that I have since I left college. But the same goes with like feelings of aggression that might hit me out of nowhere just prior to some situation erupting that could cause a lot of damage to friendships and relationships if I overreacted. So, whatever was influencing me had foreknowledge of the immediate future, and it seemed like it was manipulating me into being off balance so that I wouldn't make the right choice when confronted with it. But by realizing that these sudden changes were external manipulation, I could actually disown them and thereby locate my true inner feelings and act from those instead. So after doing this for a while, whatever was causing the problem finally backed off, like it wasn't working anymore for them. So that was the thing that I learned, that if these things are external, the worst thing you can do is to identify with them and to think that, they have to be your own, and to start blaming yourself or feeling guilty for them. I found it way more effective to treat them as if they were an external influence, and then just, putting my hand up and pushing them away and then going on with my true inner self, which, more often than not ended up overcoming these influences.
Well, I've experienced a lot of the very same thing myself. It's so important to get in touch with the essence or the frequency, the energy of who we really are. Because then you can, when this other stuff starts to happen, you can go, wait a minute, this is not what I choose. And I mean, we've spent, many months now talking about our shadow aspects. It's why it's so important to make a deep inventory and connect with our feelings and own these fragmented parts of ourselves. Because when we don't own them, also they can be super manipulated. But when we're willing to face, I'm really being nasty here, or I do feel aggressive, or I'm just depressed, that you can even identify what you're feeling and then start to move through the energy and recognize if it's really hard to move. Like, wow, this feels like a ton of bricks or whatever. Just recognize, wow, this doesn't even feel like it's all me. Boom. Just calling it by name, the clouds part, and you can start moving back, like you say, into your spirit essence, your soul essence. It becomes so easy, but it only is easy if we can identify the truth. The truth shall set us free. It's really, really works that way from my experience as well, Tom.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, one of the suspicious indicator of some of these influences is that they start and they stop pretty abruptly. So if you think, if it were like a chemical imbalance, like let's say you didn't get enough vitamins in your diet recently, then your feeling, it wouldn't just go away the moment you pay attention to it, Whereas if it were an actual intentional, technological or psychic means of applying pressure, then as soon as, they realize that their chances of succeeding have gone like basically down to zero, boom, they let up. And then you would, like you said, feel the clouds part suddenly. That's pretty important to become aware of it. And, even if it does originate from something you've done or thought or, even if that's the case, it's important to realize that you don't have to continue with it. You have the free will to break out of it. So, that's what we have to remember.
Yes, and we have such incredible power within us to break out of all of this. The Emperor doesn't have any clothes on. The Wizard of Oz is just this old guy behind the curtain. This is what they don't want us to know, how really easy it is to break out of this. Because when you're in these states, it doesn't feel like you can ever break out of it, right? You just feel like, oh God, get me drunk, give me a joint, whatever. Just escape, dissociate.
Yeah, right. Yeah, actually, that reminds me. One of the tricks that I developed was something that I called a lifeline, and the way it works is when you're in these states, these negative states, it is like you're intoxicated. And, when people are drunk, sometimes they're too drunk to realize that they are drunk, right? So what I learned to do was basically to write myself a list of, like a snapshot of my positive and sober mindset when I would be in a positive and sober mindset, and write it down. And then this way, next time I would be in this lower negative state, I could then pull out that list. And even though my mind wouldn't want to remember it, even though, this force didn't want me to connect with that more positive and sober state, here I had a list that I had already written down that I could now refer to and, basically meditate upon. And that then would allow me to anchor, to pull on the rope back to shore, so to speak. That's why I call it a lifeline, to get back into that original sober and positive state. So, this thing that I had written down was like a mnemonic device that I resorted to when I didn't have the ability to remember what that state was like on my own, if I didn't have that list. So so what you just said reminded me of that trick.
Yeah, I mean, we get so seduced into drugs, alcohol, whatever, to try to change the energy state, because these states feel horrible. But that just often makes it far worse, because then we lose our ability to navigate our own course. I'm realizing that more and more. Many of us have lost our way, lost our way, trying to avoid these things. It would work far better if we simply could identify what they are and shift our energy with our own self-empowerment than all of these other things, and the drugs and the massive drug industry to change our chemistry. And that keeps telling us it's all chemical imbalances or hormonal imbalances, or dopamine imbalances or serotonin imbalances. And then you take something to do that, and it can cut you off from your access to your own essential core and have you be even more into their game, it seems to me.
Yeah, that's a big problem, definitely.
All right, let's go on. Breaking up of networks. What's this one about?
Ah, yes. The most common and most serious form of interference that I've seen in my life is the breaking up of networks, friendships, and relationships. Now, Abe Morgan has talked a lot about this in regards to relationships, and I myself have seen how it can work within big networks, where basically it's like people are profiled for their weaknesses, and then they're played against each other in very precise and calculated ways to create the maximum amount of damage. I saw this happen all the time on the Noble Realms forum that I ran for several years. This forum was a constant target of disruptions, because it was a fringe sanctuary of sorts, and a lot of good came from it. But people were being targeted left and right on that forum, and I was like the sole moderator and administrator of the forum, so I was responsible for keeping the forum going. And actually, one guy, he actually emailed me saying that he had to leave the forum for a while because he was so spooked at his own overreactions, by the sensations of being overcome by an external psychic pressure. It was like nothing he had ever experienced before in his life. And, that scared the hell out of him, and that's why he had to leave for a while. So from what I could tell, some external force was profiling members. It was scanning them for their weaknesses, like who held what interests, who had what buttons and what ego sensitivities and so on. And then this force could also see the immediate future and tell when certain people would be at their low points, which I noticed actually tended to correlate with the moon cycles and also biorhythm cycles. So it would pick the weakest people and start working them over, possibly through abduction or, some telepathic means, so that at their weakest time, they could be pressured into carrying out a certain act, into saying something that had a very strategically calculated effect. And then one thing would trigger another, and the end result would usually be a permanent ruin of important friendships and great damage to my credibility and reputation as well. But luckily, I caught on to this near the beginning, and I got better and better at heading it off. Like, for instance, I developed some precognitive skills. Like, I would get precognitive dreams and other indicators that would let me know who would be the problem, what the issue would be about, and roughly when it would occur. And actually, when I would tell people about this, they wouldn't believe me until it actually happened, and then they'd be kind of spooked by that too. But that allowed me to make some prescient, if you could say, some moderator moves that prevented about half of these incidences from coming to fruition. So people who didn't have the inside scoop, they're pretty mystified at my moderation style, but little did they know there was an invisible war happening behind the scenes. And, this then is what allowed me to keep the forum running for a good 4 years before I had to move on to other things.
Wow, this happens to me in every group I ever. That's why I've decided that unless people become aware of these levels and do their own inner shadow work, I can't even do any groups, even political action groups, nothing. It happens absolutely on target all the time. All right, let's move on. Signs of monitoring. What is that?
Yeah, that's another common one. Even back in Germany, I would get occasional ringing in the ears. Like they call it tinnitus, but tinnitus in the medical sense is an actual disorder of the ears. But this uses the same mechanism in a meaningful way. I'm sure a lot of people listening have had a tone in the ears that kind of kicks in and then fades out again. Well, looking back on my childhood when I used to get those, they would always cluster around the times when I would have my abductions. Well, it wasn't until about 10 years ago that I figured out what these ear ringings meant for me. In my case, they were signs of being psychically pinged by an entity that was scanning me. This is what I deduced from all my observations and the timing of it. I kept a logbook of when they would happen and what would follow and so on, and that's what I determined. So to me, it was a sign of being monitored, usually in anticipation of something that I didn't know yet about, like an impending abduction or some disinformation agent sent my way, or some orchestrated hit on the forum that would impact me, or basically any event that whatever was doing the monitoring would find strategically important. So I would get these ear ringings and other symptoms in the days or sometimes even minutes leading up to the main event. The correlation was good enough that I could actually use these ear ringings as a pretty reliable indicator that something was around the corner, and then that was one of my other indicators that I used, in addition to precognitive dreams, to avoid a lot of these orchestrated incidences.
Now, was the ringing in the right ear things that would clear and would transmute, and ringings in the left ear were hits that were just immovable negative forces hurling your way? Because that's what we discovered in a lot of our research. Were the ringings different in each ear?
Yeah, actually, I looked into this question. And I asked a lot of people about, do they get ear ringings, what ear is it, and what have they associated it with. And what I found across the board that they all had in common is that the right ear had a more positive connotation and the left ear had a more negative connotation. Yep. But here's the thing. It depended on what the basic meaning of the ear ringing was for a person. Like in my case, it means monitoring, okay? And in regards to an event coming up. And what I found for me was that my right ear had to do with an event coming up that would impact my will to continue, my self-confidence. It would basically try to bring me to my knees. Whereas left ear had more to do with bringing out my like an aggressive overreaction, irritation, kind of saying something that I would regret. So the left for me had more to do with negative parts of myself, such as ego and aggression and so on. Whereas right ear had more to do with my positive side, like my confidence and faith and so on. So yes, in my case, it was positive on the right, negative on the left. Now, for another person, the right ear might mean, I don't know, like a heads up from like a angelic spirit guide or something. While the left ear, might have to do with some negative event coming up or negative monitoring by dark beings. But whatever the base meaning of the ear ringing is, I noticed that right has a relatively more positive connotation than the left.
Interesting. Okay. Weakening process leading up to critical decisions. You did talk a little about this, but I think there's more here to go into.
Yeah, well, this kind of sums up what I was kind of getting at in the past couple minutes, which is that I noticed that I would get a lot of interference in the days leading up to some negatively orchestrated event, and the purpose of that was likely to weaken me and throw me off balance. Like, one example, I would get hit with this amped up nervous energy that felt like having too much caffeine in my system, even though I didn't have any caffeine that week. And, that would result in a couple days of sleep deprivation, or at least really, really poor sleep. Along with that, I would also get this pulsation of the glowing, what are called the phosphenes in my field of vision. It's like when you close your eyes and you push on your eyelids, you see those little sparkles. Well, even if my eyes open, I would get some of those and they'd be pulsing at a certain frequency. And I actually measured what that frequency was, and it was 8 cycles per second, which is in the alpha brainwave state. Now, that state is too low to be fully awake, and it's also too high to be fully asleep. So, if it had a brainwave and training effect, that further added to my sleep deprivation. Then about a day before the actual orchestrated event, I noticed that, I'd say 8 times out of 10, someone would always email me being like a complete jerk and then trying to provoke me into a really negative emotional reaction. And then I think that was mainly to either test me or throw me further off balance. I mean, I'm not really sure on that, but it's one of the patterns I noticed. And then lastly, when I did manage to get some sleep finally, they would always be really violent, disturbing nightmares. So I would wake up from them all tired and discombobulated, only to be thrown into that orchestrated event where my self-restraint and my judgment were really put to the test. So, it's like the odds were really stacked against me, by getting me prepared for that event, to be as least awake and as least balanced as possible. And this thing would actually happen once or twice a month for the 4 years that I ran my forum, and also afterwards when the opportunity arose. But it's always the same pattern, and I'm still working on how to deal with that. So if there's something that still goes on from those days when I ran the forum, it would be that pattern of sequences that I just described.
Oh yeah, I can totally co-sign this whole thing. I mean, my life has been, I haven't had any formal abductions as such, but these forces completely bombarded my reality in the 30 years that I was connected with Aisha Love. She was attacked incessantly, and we had an opportunity to watch these things without, I love the precision that you articulate them, because it's very hard to know. And it's so easy to just think that you're tripping, and that you're just making this stuff up, and it's just life, and get over yourself. But the exaggerated level of setup and people turning on you and energy states just driving you into such states of imbalance. I mean, I've seen this go on for year after year. So it's actually refreshing to me, to hear you articulate it with such balance and clarity.
Yeah, well, another thing that gives it away as a manipulation and not just some chemical imbalance is that it can happen to multiple people at the same time, so that, all these different ingredients come together at the appointed time, and it all kind of just blows up, I mean, what are the chances that everyone would have their little individual customized tweaks that, it's like a Rube Goldberg contraption where one thing hits another and finally, plops the egg into the pan or something. So, yeah, I mean, the artifice behind it, that's what gives it away for me.
And this is why it's so important that we come together now and really support one another and learn ways to be steady in our authentic presence. What will it take to make that shift? Because they've engineered this world to keep us so separate, so stressed, so isolated and toxic, and on and on. And with this as the final, caveat, like, my God, it's very, very challenging. It's challenging for us. We can be aware of these things, and we've made great progress. But there has to be another level taken, a level of education and coming together in community, however those manifest, and creating programs, courses, which are going to be coming up here soon, to really develop the discernment, because this is a self-mastery. This takes a lot of self-discipline and study, and there's no place that I know of that has got the clarity and the precision to really maneuver through the level of this interference that is actually what we are engaged in here. I mean, I don't know what your solutions are for these sorts of things. We have like 4 minutes left. We should probably talk about what's next in terms of what I just mentioned. For example, it will be posted on the Shadowland forum, and probably you'll be posting it on your website and on my Facebook page, Sienna Lea. We're going to be doing roundtable discussions and courses and things in the future with Tom, with George Kavasilis, with Eve Lorgan, and others that really break this down, dive deeper into it. They will be interactive. They will involve process work and mutual support eventually, so that we're not just talking and leaving leaving you hanging. And
Yes.
you may want to also mention once again, Tom, the things that you have to offer people on your website as well for them to go on and to connect with you around these topics that we brought up.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to email me, you can email me at tom@montalk.net if you have any questions, or go to my website, montalk.net, montalk.net. And let me just finish up by saying that one of the quick fixes that I've found is that you can identify roughly what negative commands or what negative influences are shaping your attitude, and you can create equal and opposite statements that you can use as affirmations. Okay, that's one thing you can do. Another thing I've found important is to spend a few minutes every day before getting up doing what it takes to put yourself into a good and healthy mindset. This way you start the day on a mindset of your own choosing rather than letting what happened during the night or the day before decide that. So the way I see it, as long as I'm conscious and awake, I have free will to take control of my thoughts and my feelings. You know, they might have the night, but I rule the day. And that's the way I see it. And if my positive gains outdo negative influences, then I win, and and they lose. So I learned that if you can't block them fully, you can still outmaneuver them by having more light within yourself than they can snuff out. And that's really what it comes down to.
That's really, really true. So we're talking really about a spiritual war for our souls on the planet. They're never sleeping on this, doesn't seem to me. I mean, there are times when things are lighter, and there are times when your energy is moving, and there's cycles and there are rhythms. But to really be triumphant and empowered and sovereign, we have to develop the maturity to recognize that we're in a war zone here for our souls, 24/7. And it doesn't have to be a horrible thing, does it? Because you just take on the task of being a spiritual warrior, and that becomes foremost. Yes, we have to survive. We have to take care of our families. We have to take care of our bodies. We have to earn money. We have to do all these things. But there's a reprioritization that needs to occur. And there could be an enormous shift if we really get that this is so, that this is where we are. And that's why I so appreciate you, Tom, because you're very matter of fact about this. You've lived this your whole life. And you seem to be, you seem to be good with it. I'm sure you have your good days and your bad days like anyone else in 3D on planet Earth right now.
Yeah, well, it wasn't easy. But one thing that definitely helped was communicating with other people and comparing notes and thinking a lot about this. You know, I have this notebook, this blank notebook, and I just write out my thoughts in there and I figure things out. I mean, it's like doing a math problem, you know. You know, if I ask you to multiply, what's, 394 times 896, it's going to be really hard to do in your head, but if you do it on paper, you can figure it out. So the same with, a lot of these metaphysical issues. It's a lot easier to work it out if you can actually write it down and kind of just pour over your thoughts and brainstorm and come up with solutions. So I've done that a lot in life, and actually my website is a result of doing that more than anything else. So yeah, I mean, contemplation, introspection, those two things will lead to revelation, and that's what we need to figure out a lot of these mysteries.
Thank you so much for being here for these 3 weeks, Tom. It's been a great honor to dive into this information. Please go to Tom's website, montalk.net, and to Shadowland Forum.